As part of the Every Child Matters agenda, all school support staff are being encouraged to find new ways of delivering pastoral care.
What we're trying to do is provide a support service which will enable young people, children and young people, to actually make a smoother transition to adult life. And I think that's important in any school.
Multi-agency working is at the heart of the new approach.
There's a cycle of underachievement, low self-esteem, disaffection that tends to manifest itself in urban areas. And I honestly believe that a multi-agency approach is what's required to remove those barriers to learning.
David Lister, a challenging inner-city school in Hull, was an early adopter of the multi-agency approach. It established its own in-house team, comprising a mix of teaching and support staff.
This is what makes the school quite strong, to have a centre like this, because it offers that support to the family and it offers support to the community, really, which is where it's needed.
Some youngsters would have 5 or 6 different agencies knocking on the door. We've now got a single worker who is the key worker. It's much more efficient, we keep each other informed, and more people get a better service.
Fabulous thing to have. Everybody should be able to access this kind of support.
This programme looks at how David Lister made MAST, a multi-agency support team, work to deliver real change. Some of the challenges faced by the school are amongst the most difficult in the field. Not all schools face the same challenges, but many can learn valuable lessons from what's been achieved in Hull.
I had to think of ways in which I could reduce stress or workload on teachers in such a way that would enable them to concentrate on the teaching and learning. Teachers' workload isn't just about physical workload, it's about emotional workload. And in the past, it's fairly common knowledge that schools, education services and social services don't always work together. So the next thing I did was to contact the Director of Social Services. We had a meeting, we discussed the issues. Everybody agreed that it was good for agencies to work together.
Retired head Max Roberts was recruited to get the project up and running.
I think at that stage this was a fairly radical and innovative project to try and meet the needs, social, behavioural, emotional needs of young people in the local community.
Next, Gillian Bruin joined the team as the in-house family assessment worker.
I was here when there was just pink walls and a desk. It was very interesting because the first thing we had to do was look at the policies, procedures, the paperwork, how we were going to support families, what really was the need. And we didn't have any baselines apart from social services, really, and connections, people like that that were already meeting young people's needs. So we were looking at what was out there and we formed the basis of MAST on that.
The school secured funding to refurbish an old youth centre within the school boundaries to act as an HQ.
The MAST building was originally a youth club, which was separate. So this corridor was built so it could link in to student services, which exists just outside the door. We go through into the MAST building as such, where we've got the business centre at the end. We've got 2 smaller rooms here. These rooms are used for one-to-ones. Conference room, which again is dual purpose. This is where meetings will take place, the multi-agency meetings, the referral meetings.
Max talked to external agencies and found them receptive.
Initially I thought this is going to be very tricky, but it wasn't, because social services were very keen to become partners in this, and it's fair to say that they're the strongest link. They are one of our main partners. And so it didn't have any of the difficulties that I was imagining I would face at the beginning.
An early decision was to second a social worker to the school based in the building. It pays dividends in response times.
It provides us better outcomes for children. It's early prevention work, early detection and early intervention, so that you're not actually waiting until a child is totally in crisis.
The system now is that where there's contact with social services or whatever, which would take time before, really we now have a social worker down the corridor, and response is a lot more immediate. And that time does not have to now be found from teachers.
wanted to ask me.
Connections provides careers advice.
Right, voluntary work. And what kind of area are you interested in?
The refugees.
Yeah.
Women.
Well, the thing is, there are a few places that could be of interest. There's a couple of women's centres around which I can kind of contact because I've got quite good links with them. And I know that they do tend to take on a lot of young people, basically.
The combination of skills and the proximity to each other is useful.
It's the fact that all agencies are together and we can discuss it, and the fact that we all have different specialities, which is always good because sometimes it can be hard to get somebody over the phone, but here it's a matter of just going the next door and asking them about it. We're all aware of all the young people that we're working with. So, for example, if I've got some information on one and they've got some information on the other, we can always get together and share that information. It's never that difficult. And just generally, the atmosphere just seems to be quite a supportive atmosphere. It's a kind of a bit of a place for them to come and chill out with us, really, and just know that there's somebody to support them through any issues.
One of the main functions of Connections is to try to reduce the number of NEETs. These are those young people who are not in education, employment and training, aged 16 to 19. And I think Lister is quite proud of the fact that our NEET figures have fallen for the last 3 years. We think it's from early identification and early intervention and working alongside with numerous agencies for whom it is important that all young people are in education or employment or training when they leave school.
Besides the work in the centre, Max spends a lot of time in the community, building relationships with other agencies like the fire service and the police.
Really, we facilitate for MAST. If MAST require our services, we'll come in. Antisocial behaviour breeds fires, and that underage drinking causes problems. They need to keep warm during the winter, so what they'll do, they'll start fires. Things like that. It's all linked. Antisocial behaviour, fires, drugs, car fires, they're all linked. So if we can engage with the youth through MAST, then that's really beneficial.
Our work with the fire service, for instance, means that youngsters who may have had difficulties with fire, but also in terms of their anger, are now working with the fire service and experiencing some of the controls and the discipline that the fire crew have to show. And I have to say, it's what, again, our youngsters really enjoy being part of that team.
The biggest advantage we have is that we have activities that youths can get involved with, which they've always wanted to be involved with. Running out fire hose, putting out fires, learning about fires. What we can provide them with is a disciplined environment where they know the reasons why they have to be disciplined because it's for their own safety.
Agencies like the fire service and the police are invited to regular meetings where individual cases are discussed.
Usually you'll get an email with the referrals of the children that we're going to discuss, so then you look on your own systems and if you've got any information to bring to the meeting, you bring it.
You can look at the full picture in one go rather than getting a bit of information from this agency, a bit from that agency, and then probably 3 or 4 weeks later building up a picture. With MAST it's all done in one go, and then within that same meeting everybody's been tasked with facilitating a certain part of the support package. Recently there's been some more activity as far as antisocial behaviour is concerned with this individual. So we need to continue with the support really from all the agencies. As far as housing is concerned and the police will be doing a follow-up call to see this individual, to see what's going on, because he has been doing quite well. So I think it's important that we continue with whatever the youth team are doing.
In one particular instance, we were looking to maybe exit a student, but it's been brought to our attention by the ASBO officer that in fact they do have some concerns. We're looking at the idea with discussions with local youth workers that they can provide some more one-to-one support and perhaps some group work there that may help reduce the danger of antisocial activities being carried on.
I'll suggest that actually the key worker might have a word with Nuvi from Connections just to link that support up as well. So
well, I'll make sure Nuvi gets that information in the morning.
Yeah.
The only way you can do it is if you make it a full package. You can blitz them, get them in, get them out, like a production line, but what you need is the package at the end to follow that on. Because if you don't follow it on, they'll just slip back down again. And that's where MAST will come in.
To make sure the right children are being referred to the multi-agency team, the school have come up with a system to measure hierarchy of need. A score of 0 to 3 is dealt with by the school's pastoral team, but more complex cases, at levels 4 and 5, are referred to the multi-agency team.
The aim of this is to ensure that we identify need early and meet that need effectively. And we're able to show that we have brought down the number of youngsters who have needed crisis intervention. And where there is a real crisis, we're able to respond.
The danger in any school is that it's immediately seen as extra resources, and if you've a child that's encountering problems or behaviour or whatever, well, this may be somewhere where you can just pass them over to, which is not necessarily the case. MAST is not a pupil referral unit in the sense of, you know, the pupils are based with us for a day. That is not how it works. We work in a much more proactive way than that. But we do work very closely with the school. We're a part of the school. We spent many hours to begin with explaining the role of MAST to staff in the school, explaining the referral process, explaining what we were about, how we could support, what we did and what we didn't do.
The success of the approach at David Lister has led to an invitation to take part in the government pilot scheme to test out common assessment.
Common assessment and the multi-agency assessment is exactly the same thing, so it meets the need in exactly the same way. The difference is that under common assessment, everybody has the same paperwork. There doesn't have to be this constant barrage of people coming to the family home to ask the same questions to put on a different form.
The multi-agency team also holds a monthly strategy meeting for key workers and management.
We always have to be aware of the fact that all the agencies will still have their own value systems, and therefore sometimes when you're working together, there can be situations where people might retreat a little bit into their own little boxes, because when you've got changes in the working practices, it can lead to crisis of confidence. And so that's where my role then becomes a lot more listening, a lot more support, a lot more encouraging, diplomatically negotiating ways in which we can work together.
12 months into the scheme, the money from one of its funders ran out. A measure of the scheme's success was that the money was immediately replaced by social services.
They came back to us and said the number of referrals for youngsters in this area have dropped, and the number of inappropriate referrals have become 0. So we believe, they said, that it's worth our while to pay for a social worker to be in school.
This was a crucial result for David Lister and is something they recommend to other schools embarking on multi-agency ways of working.
When you take that funding away, have you actually created the right infrastructure? Does everybody feel that they can continue without those additional staff? Because when the money goes away, the additional staff has to go away. We got the additional funding for 1 year, and at the end of that, people have to put the money where the mouth is.
MAST has certainly been a catalyst for change, especially in the way in which we've networked and integrated with our community in its widest sense. And so there is now a much more coordinated and coherent approach from the various agencies.